to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories, India's very own travel podcast, where each week we share the journey of travelers in their own words and relive their experiences with you, our listeners. Hey guys, welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories.
It's been a long time since we recorded together.
I know, a really long time.
But yeah, we're here for a special reason. We're celebrating 6 years of the podcast this month. A podcast that we started as a couple project.
Yeah, and now we have a small Musafir that keeps me busy during the recordings.
Yes, the little Musafir has literally made it impossible for us to record together. But hopefully we'll be back recording episodes together soon.
Yeah.
We'd like to thank our wonderful guests who have made the podcast possible by enabling us to see India through their eyes.
Yeah.
And also our brilliant listeners who have kept us motivated by their constant support and feedback. This would not have been possible without you.
Yes, guys. Thank you so much. Well, to celebrate today's episode, we speak to Girin Nayak, the founder of XOtoXO Games. And he takes us to some lesser known gems in Tamil Nadu, talking about the tales and tiles of Chettinad. Let's hop on to the episode and find out more.
See you on the other side. So with that introduction, we'd love to welcome Girin Nayak, a listener, a traveler, and also founder and director at XOtoXO Games. Girin, thank you so much for being on the podcast and welcome.
Thank you, Saif. I've been listening to this podcast for the last 4 or 5 years and I'm really happy, honored and excited to be on here. So thanks a lot for having me.
No, thank you. It's always a delight to have listeners on the podcast and reminds us as well that from where we started, like I mentioned, 4 or 5 years, right? Actually, Musafir Stories complete 6 years in Feb. So right around the time this episode will release, we'll probably be completing 6 years. But thank you so much. It's always a delight to have listeners and it also keeps us motivated more than anything, right? We do this as a passion project, trying to reach out to different travelers around the country. And when we get to hear from listeners, it's very, very endearing. So thank you, Girin. But Girin, the intro I gave was pretty brief and concise. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Girin Nayak. I run XOtoXO Games.
Mm-hmm.
So we make board games which are about Indian culture, travel, cuisine, heritage, or at least that's the vision, to use board games as a medium to make people know of different places or different facets of culture in India, just like you have been doing with this podcast for the past few years. So I have a pretty standard sort of CV. Like I did engineering, did a business degree, worked as a corporate employee, sitting at a desk for 15 years. And then finally, like just about a year ago, I started my own thing, which is this venture. And I've been doing this, making games. We just launched our first game a couple of months ago. I've always been traveling from a very young age, whether unintentionally or intentionally. I've stayed in various parts of India, but I really got into serious travel as a mode of leisure only after I got married. My wife enjoys it as well. So after that, it's been like travel planning and all that is like part and parcel of the adventure. But all this came to a halt with COVID. So for the past 3 years, there's not been much travel happening. And plus, after that, once this new venture started, I have not really had much time to do a lot of travel. But occasionally, an opportunity pops up, and I get to call it research now instead of a holiday. So I did one of these research trips this May, this year. And this ended up inspiring my first game that I just launched like a couple of months ago. So my game is called Athangudi Artisans of Chettinad.
Mm-hmm.
And it was obviously inspired by this visit to Chettinad. And I would like to tell you more about this wonderful region that I visited this in this episode.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for telling us a little bit more about yourself. And firstly, many congratulations for taking that leap with XOtoXO Games. We wish you all the best and all the good wishes and all the luck for this new venture, and hope you succeed and bring out a lot of the history, the culture, and the traditions of India through board games to players or board game users across India as well as across the world, right? I think that's a beautiful vision to have. And you gave us a little bit of a peek into the place you visited that inspired your first game as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that too today. Why don't you tell us and the listeners a little bit more about where this place is, where exactly this place is? Chettinad, you mentioned about the region Chettinad. Tell us a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so everybody has probably seen the word Chettinad on a menu. Like maybe Chettinad chicken or say paneer, if that's your preference. But like just like gobi Manchurian, and sort of it has just become a part of the food item itself that we rarely stop to think like what on earth is Chettinad. So Chettinad is actually a region. It's not a town. It's not a village. It's like a collection of villages. To place it geographically, it's in the southeast part of Tamil Nadu. It occupies mainly Shivaganga district and a little bit of Pudukottai district as well. And it's situated like almost equidistant, like about 90 kilometers from both Madurai and Trichy. And these are your closest airports as well. So if you want to fly in, you're likely to take a flight to either Madurai or Trichy. If you want to get in by train, the major station which has like regular trains from big cities running is Karaikudi, which is like a town in one of the larger towns in the region.
Okay, no, wonderful. Thank you for setting out the geographical orientation as well for people wondering. This is in the southeastern part of Tamil Nadu, and also even for visitors who are planning on visiting from Chennai or even Bangalore for that matter, it's about 400 kilometers from both of these places, so it's pretty accessible and well connected via both trains and roadways, as well as there's a airport close by too, so definitely well connected, and for people trying to visit there, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. In terms of one visiting or planning to visit there, what sort of an itinerary, like how long of an itinerary would you recommend?
So it's really easy to see pretty much everything that is there to see in about 2 to 3 days. If you want to be really relaxed about it, you can stretch it to 4 days. So it's more like a long weekend destination if you're situated in South India. So like you said, if you're in Chennai, Bangalore, or even in Kerala, you can like spend 2-3 days here. If you're traveling from further, like maybe from North India, or if you're like visiting from abroad, then it might make sense to club it as part of a larger Tamil Nadu itinerary where you're covering Madurai, Rameshwaram, Tanjavur or something, and you can maybe spend 2 days here on the way to other destinations.
Yeah, definitely can be a part of broader itinerary as well as its own itinerary, right? And we've been mentioning a lot about the Chettinad region and how it's a collection of villages. I've read like accounts of about 70 to even in the 90s, so I'm not very sure, but yeah, it's basically a collection of villages like you mentioned. Also tell us a little bit more about what this region is popular for besides the Chettinad cuisine or Chettinad chicken that you mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, so it's actually a place that has like everything that you need on a tourist trip. So it's got great food. It's got sites to visit. It's got amazing accommodation or hotels to stay, unique stay experiences. It's got lots of activities where you can participate in. It's got architecture. It's got new stuff you can learn. It's got great shopping. So yeah, it's like an ideal sort of tourist destination to spend a lot of time.
And when is a good time to visit here, Girin? Because I keep pulling my guests leg whenever they do a Tamil Nadu itinerary that there's only three types of weathers in or climates in Tamil Nadu. It's hotter and hottest. So, when is a good time to visit here?
So this is it's not near the coast, so it's not as humid. It's actually quite dry here. So if you visit during December to February, that's probably when you'll find it most pleasant. I mean, there are places inside Tamil Nadu where you can experience a little bit of winter. So at least the nights will be pleasant in December to February. If you visit in May, like I did, it's going to be like blazing hot. Temperatures will be frequently above, say, 40 degrees. But on the other hand, it's a great time to have good deals on accommodation, because it's the off season. Like even the hotels are trying to get people to come, so you can easily get like 10-20% off what you'll usually spend if you go during peak season. So you can decide whether you want comfort or whether you want to prioritize your wallet.
Yeah, no, fair call out there. And also a couple of other things. I mean, you did mention that as a part of the offering, or what Chettinad, the region, has to offer. Architecture was one of the things you called out, so we'll speak a little bit more about that and how these mansions that we find in Chettinad are popular for. But give us a little bit of a background and history of the people of the place too, right? The Chettiyars, who are the dominant community here, about them and how this region came into being, like what they do and things like that. That'll also help towards understanding the place better.
Yeah, so Chettinad is literally Chettiyar Nadu, or land of the Natukottai Chettiyars, or they are also called Nagarathars. So this is the community that is predominantly present in this place. So they are a merchant community. They were like essentially traders or bankers who have been doing that for centuries. And they used to deal mainly in salt and spices, and they also had this banking and other sort of commercial businesses. Once the British came, so somewhere around the 17th century, or generally all the colonial powers started opening up other places in Southeast Asia. So these traders also started traveling to Southeast Asia, like Burma, Malaysia, Indonesia, Ceylon, and they started trading with them. So they were like originally seafaring people. They used to be based out of a place called Pumpuhar. Okay, it's a little south of Pondicherry. It's on the coast. Because they were seafaring people, they found it convenient to be there. It was also the historical capital of the Cholas, the Chola kingdom. At that time, it was called Kaveri Pumpattinam. So generally, the men folk were the one who were doing the trading, and they'll be away at sea, while the women, the elderly, and the children would be back in the village. And there is one of the legends that says that there was like a tsunami or something which came and wiped out the village once. And when the men came back, they were like, they did not have their families and whatever. So they wanted to leave the place, they wanted to leave the coast, and they wanted to move inland. This is one of the stories. Another story says that they had a falling out with the Chola king. He did not treat them well or something, so they wanted to move away. In either case, whichever story is the true one, the Pandya king, who was based out of Madurai, he felt that it would be advantageous for him, for if these influential traders are based out of his kingdom. So he offered them this. He gave them like around 70 villages for them to come and settle, and that is what has now become what is called this Chettinad region. And I'm sure like everyone who's listening to this podcast would have heard of at least one person from this community, because they are like really influential in India's history. Like I'll just mention a few names. So if you have heard of Chepauk Stadium, which is named after M.A. Chidambaram, he is from Chettinad. Our ex finance minister P. Chidambaram is also like from the
Right.
same family. A.C. Mutaya, who was a ex BCCI president, and A.V. Mayappan, who started AVM Studios, which is like a famous film production unit based out of Chennai. It has launched the careers of several southern superstars like Shivaji Ganesan and Kamal Haasan. They are all based out of these villages from Chettinad. So it's this is the history of the region, and because of their history of trading, they became very wealthy and influential, and they slowly the region they moved to, that is this Chettinad, is like really dry, and there's not much scope for agriculture, neither is there much scope of industry because water is scarce. So many of them have moved to other places, or maybe even moved abroad to work. And many of them have become established industrialists and so on, but they still maintain their roots to this place. They use their wealth to build up these amazing huge mansions, beautiful mansions in their home, and then they visit once a year for family functions and so on.
Yeah, and we'll kind of touch upon a little bit more about those huge mansions, right? That'll be one of the key points of interest for anybody visiting the region. These humongous mansions, right? We are talking in thousands of square feet, like 40,000 square feet mansions that are there, and there's like thousands of these mansions also, right? I mean, right now maybe there's not many left because, like I mentioned, a lot of people have moved away from here, and upkeep also becomes a challenge. But back in the day, when this community and the tradesmen who were abroad were at their peak, like a lot of the wealth as well as a lot of the beautiful things they saw and appreciated from abroad, right? Be it Southeast Asia or even a lot of European countries, they brought back a lot of those things and put that into these mansions, right? That's how we have thousands of these beautiful mansions, and they really, really stand out. I think one of the unique types of architectures you'll see even within India, and actually made me think back about, we did a couple of episodes. One was on the Shekhawati region in Rajasthan that also has a similar history in the sense that was the trading community who ventured far and out from this region, and they brought back and invested the wealth in building beautiful homes and mansions for themselves. And even the episode we did on Murshidabad, right? This is in West Bengal, and that also has a similar kind of history in the sense that the banking community there, people like Jagat Seth, they set up base here, and it really transformed in terms of the houses and the architecture and the palatial mansions we see there. So kind of gives you that sense also in terms of the roots and kind of occupations these people were in that brought about this big change in the region. Now let's talk a little bit more about the place itself and your visit to the place, right? So you mentioned that you plan to visit here in the month of May. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. So there are like 3 or 4 villages that you can visit. So one thing to keep in mind is like the Chettinad is a region, like I mentioned. So you will have to base yourself in one of these places, and then you'll have to travel like maybe 10 to 20 kilometers to go to all the other sites of interest that you would like to see. So you have to keep in mind that it's probably a place where it will be useful to have your own vehicle, or to hire a taxi so that you can travel conveniently. It's probably a place where it's a little difficult if you have to manage purely by relying on public transport. But if you're really at a pinch for a budget, probably it can be done if you're willing to inconvenience yourself a bit.
Cool. We'll definitely touch upon some of those aspects as well. Now, in your case, right, how did you go about visiting these? You mentioned that this was a roughly 3-day type of an itinerary. And also tell us a little bit about the choices to stay, right, for lodging, because that is one of the offerings. The good point is these beautiful mansions that we've been speaking of, some of these have now either opened themselves up for stay, right? You could go stay there, and some of them have actually converted themselves into heritage hotels. So that way, you can actually live the experience. So, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So we drove down from Chennai. So we had our own vehicle, so it was convenient to go around. We based ourselves in a place called Kannadu Katan. It's one of the villages. It's a heritage village where there are about 100 mansions that are there. Some of them have been converted to hotels. Some of them are maintained, but they are not open to public. Like it's used for the use. It's still in use by the families when they visit the village for family functions and so on. And there are some mansions which are like which have fallen out of repair, and so they're like basically ruins. One thing that you said is like absolutely right. Like the mansions are like the one of the major reasons to go to this place. I mean, they're like mind blowing. So I would like to spend like a couple of minutes explaining these mansions in detail. You can
Sure.
find these mansions in every village. I'll cover the mansions first. There are stay options also, and then once we go to each village, I'll just talk about what the rest of the stuff that is there to do. Yeah, so there is an estimate floating about saying that there are like 11,000 mansions in the whole region. So yeah, so across various villages, there are like 100 odd mansions everywhere. So I'd like to build a sort of visual picture since of this mansion. So a mansion generally it starts with a garden or a veranda. Okay, so there'll be a small space, or it in some cases it'll also be used as like the car park sort of area. And then you enter into first what is called like a grand hall, or in some places it's also called as the marriage hall. Okay, so it's like a really ornate hall, and this was the place that was used for all their family ceremonies like weddings or like funerals or any major event that happens in the family used to happen here. So this is the one which is like the most stunning of the lot. Now because these merchants were all very wealthy, they like to show off, and they also were like willing to spend their wealth. All the materials that they use to build these mansions, they are all mostly imported. So tiles that they have were brought in either from Japan or Italy. The pillars that are there in this hall were all brought in from Italy. Any steel that is used in these mansions was brought in from England, and if wood was used somewhere, it was all Burma teak. So it's like a very global sort of list of
Yeah.
building materials that's gone into these mansions. Now all these houses are like divided into sections. So the first section was this grand hall. Then you can pass through a door and enter into there's like a courtyard which is there just behind. This is the second section of the house. So this courtyard is where like generally the family used to go about their day. So there are corridors running on either side of this courtyard, and these have the rooms. So they are typically the bedrooms of the house will be on the sides of this courtyard. There is usually a first floor also, and there'll be a corridor running around it. The roof of the courtyard is open, so from the first floor you can look down and see what is happening in the house. And a lot of these mansions have like over 100 rooms. Or not all the 100 rooms will be open if you go to visit or to stay in one of these places. You'll probably see a small section of these mansions. A lot of the sections are more private, or like there might be people living there and so on. So that's how it is. And behind this is, I mean, you pass through a door and then you reach the third sort of courtyard, and this was the area where generally the either the kitchen would be located, or maybe the storage area for all the grains and food and so on, and also maybe the toilets. So these were like three general sections that are there. And interestingly, there is like it's probably anecdotal. I don't know how much of it is true. Like like I mentioned the story about how the Chettinad people wanted to be as far away from the sea as possible, and this sort of paranoia of being scared of the water continued. So all these mansions are built like 5-6 feet above the ground, so that they'll still be above the water. This sectioned way of building the houses is also supposedly to prevent water from flowing easily from one section to another. The other thing is like these villages, because they came and settled and they specifically built the villages the way they wanted to. They're like well planned. I mean, like they are all like roads are laid out in proper grids, all perpendicular to each other, and so on. And they also had the benefit of making a very good canal system, or a sort of irrigation or drainage system, which is connected from all the houses, and it all leads to the temple pond, which is placed lower in height than the rest of the village. So there's like a natural drainage of water that is planned in these villages.
Sure. And in terms of the time, I guess these were built roughly in the early 1900s, right? Giran?
Yeah, depends. There are some which go back to the 19th century, and then some in the early 20th century. But like most of them are like close to 100 years old or even more.
Okay, okay, interesting. And from the perspective of Karnataka, then, are there any specific places you'd like to call out that one should visit?
Yeah, so the general structure of almost all these Chettinad villages is roughly the same. So there'll be a temple which is both the religious as well as the sort of cultural center. And next to the temple, there'll be a pond. So even in Kannadakatan, there is a temple and a pond. Even if you're not religiously inclined, it makes like a very good walk around the village, either early morning or like evening before sunset. So it's the whole city is a whole village is like really walkable. I mean, it's not really the heritage area. I mean, it takes maybe half an hour to go around the whole village. So it's like a nice pleasant walk. If you go out in the morning, you can see children heading to school. In the evening, there'll be like a couple of small vendors on carts who come and set up shop next to the pond, and you can have like a light snack or some like a cold drink or something like that. So this is one of the things you can do in Kannadakatan. If you're a little more touristy, they have like a small horse-drawn cart, which you can hire. It's not the ornate, elaborate, ceremonial one. This is like the one that was used in the villages for transport. So it's really small. It has a covered roof, and sorry, it's not a horse. It's pulled by a bullock.
Right,
So
right.
you can go around the village. It'll take you around for in like 10-15 minutes or so. And something which is like not very not in the traditional mold is but very interesting is that Kannadakatan also has an abandoned airfield. So this was one of the earliest airports which was there in India. So
Right.
apparently one of the businessmen actually started an airline called Jupiter Airlines pre-independence. So when the British were leaving, they had a few aircraft or something like that which they were leaving behind, and he decided to start a airline with those planes. But it didn't last long. Like soon after independence, yes, he lent some of the planes for the war effort and so on, and I think the business closed down pretty quickly. The airfield was also used by the British during World War II as a supply depot. So, like planes used to come and refuel there or something like that. It makes for a it's really secluded. I mean, there is nothing there. It makes for a very good photo opportunity. Like you can stand with the entire runway as the background.
Okay. Yeah, in terms of the mansions themselves, right? Like Chettinad Palace is one of the prominent ones here, I believe, right? That one is
So
in.
Kannada Kathan has, incidentally, another reason why I strongly recommend this place is because it has something across budgets. Okay, so it has the only backpacker hostel as far as I know in this Chettinad region. It's called Chettinad
Okay.
Backpackers. There is like a mid-range sort of hotel, which is not a mansion. It's like a regular hotel,
Okay.
which is called Chettinad Court. They also, but the same owners also have a mansion. Okay, so which is called Chettinad Mansion. So if you stay in Chettinad Court, you'll pay slightly less than what you pay in a mansion, but they let you visit the mansion and look around because it's the same owners. And then probably at the top of the range, there is one called Vishalam, which is by the CGH group of hotels. This one is like really, it's a really interesting place. It has its own story also. So firstly, it is while it has elements of this, I mean, some broad elements of this Chettinad architecture, like they also have a courtyard and sort of thing. Firstly, this is built in an Art Deco style of architecture. It's like different
Right.
from it. It looks different from all the other mansions that are there. Secondly, the story behind it is that this was apparently built by a businessman for his daughter who was unmarried. So it was in that age, it was like unheard of for women to stay
Right.
unmarried or like unsupported or whatever. Due to some circumstances, this lady was unmarried or widowed, I don't remember what, and her father did not want her to suffer and still have her independence, so he built this place for her, and so that has now been converted into a really beautiful heritage property. And it's also it's probably one of the more expensive ones in the area, but it's absolutely well maintained. The rooms are huge, so really nice place.
Right. Okay, cool. Thanks so much for highlighting all of those important things and different experiences one could enjoy while in Kana or Katan. Now, in terms of the other villages you visited, which ones do you want to start with next?
Yeah, I'll move to Karaikudi, which is like probably the most sort of well known town in the region, because
Yeah.
it's got the railway station. If you come by train, you're likely to land here. This one is it's a town which has modernized, so it's less on heritage and more on, say, convenient modern day conveniences is the way I would put it. But there are still a few things that you can do here. It obviously has a lot of restaurants, with the benefit that they'll also be open later. Like one problem with say Kannadakatan is most of or almost like in most of the villages, all the touristy areas or things to do generally close by sundown. There will be a few sort of small restaurants or something operating. You may not be able to find everything that you need at your convenience, but Karaikudi is like I mean, you'll find things at any time of the day. It's more accessible. There are still a few things to do here. One is called, it's called the Ayiram Jannal Veedu. Translated, it means it is a house with 1,000 windows. Apparently the house is so big that it has 1,000 windows. That's how the story goes. But again, it's a private place. It is not open to the public, so you can
Okay.
maybe stand on the road and click a couple of pictures, and then you'll have to go about with your
Yeah.
day. Another interesting thing that is there in Karaikudi is the market. So because it's a proper town, it has a market where there is a section for your regular vegetables and fruits. There is a huge metalwork market where you can find like very nice quality utensils, brassware, like all this lamps and such kind of things. And tucked away in a small corner of this market, there is actually a lane which is full of antiques. It's called the antique market. It has a lot of old relics from British days, or maybe some of the things which were sold off by the mansion owners who were unable to keep up with maintaining the property
Right.
and so on. You can find items made of ceramic, woodwork, sculptures, statues, metalworks. There are few shops which only sort of repair and sell safes, like a safe or a almirah a type of metal storage thing. But you have to remember that this market mainly caters to foreign tourists. The Chettinad area itself gets a large number of foreign tourists. So generally, the visitors here are quite wealthy. So the prices here are like going to be quite expensive,
Right.
and you can try to bargain, but you have to keep in mind that if the shopkeeper feels he's able to sell at his price to someone else, he's not likely to negotiate with you. So it's good to go and have a look around, uh, but generally it the if you're really looking to acquire an antique or something like that, it's going to cost anywhere in the high 10,000s or maybe even lakhs. One reason why a lot of people might choose to stay in Karaikudi is because one of the famous heritage hotels is situated here, or like a slightly outside town. It's called the Bangla. So it's really popular. I mean, they're like quite popular on Instagram, and it's a really, again, it's superbly maintained property, and it's a popular stay destination for a lot of people who visit the region.
Yeah, I think that was one thing we probably didn't touch upon at the beginning as well. This place is actually visited by a lot of foreigners. You'd be surprised, but a lot of foreign tourists, and especially for the architecture aficionados, right? This is just like heaven. So a lot of foreign tourists also visit here, and this particular place, the Bangla. Apparently, it was a gentleman's club previously, and now it's been basically turned into a heritage hotel. So yeah, for somebody looking for options of staying here, especially given that this is the trailhead or point for any railway connectivity, it might be an option to consider. Awesome. So where was your next stop after this, after exploring Karaikudi?
So we'll move to Tirumayam. It's to the north. It's to the north of both Karaikudi and Kanadukatan. The main thing to do in Tirumayam is that there is a fort. So it's a very small, cute fort. It dates to the 17th century. It was constructed by the Raja of Ramnad. Okay, and it has had sort of significant importance even during the fight against the British. So the rebel chieftains who used to be in the area used to have this fort as a base when they were fighting against the British East India Company. So locally, this fort is called Umayan Kotai. Umay means dumb, and Kotai means fort. This is because there was a person called Umadurai, which means he was apparently he was dumb. He was the brother of a famous Tamil freedom fighter called Veerapandiya Kattabomman. So he was captured by the British and he was hanged in this fort. So that's how he has lent his name to this fort.
Yeah, interesting, and also offers a little bit of a variation if you're looking to get away from the mansion hopping that you're mostly doing on this trip. This fort offers you that that opportunity. Cool. And after visiting this, is there any other mansions in Tirumayam that one can see? Okay.
So Tirumayam, there's a village, and probably the most famous a mansion there is called Chidambara Villas, and this is again it's a luxury hotel, so it's one of the more expensive ones. And again, here you get the full Chettinad experience.
Okay, cool. And having spent some time at Tirumayam, where would you suggest we visit next?
So from Tirumayam, we'll head to Athangudi. So Athangudi is a village that is somewhere between Kanadukatan and Karaikudi. There are two main things to do. One is you can visit the Athangudi Palace. It's called the Periya Veedu, or the big house. So this is again, it's another Chettinad mansion. So if you have already seen too many of them, maybe you can skip it. The other thing which Athangudi is really famous for is floor tiles. So Athangudi floor tiles are handmade, and the village is full of small factories where these tiles are made. So these are like really beautiful tiles, very colorful. They generally have geometric patterns on them. They are like coveted by homeowners and architects. Visiting this tile factory is one of the things you can do here. If you are staying in one of the bigger mansions, a lot of them have it as part of their things to do list. They'll have arrangements with one of the factories, and you can go and see. Or otherwise, if you're on your own, you can just walk up to one of them and ask, like, can I take a look around? They'll probably charge like 50 rupees or something per head, and they'll show you how it is done.
Yeah, the process is also pretty unique, right? It's not like one of those large scale manufacturing units. A lot of the stuff here is handmade and done like by the artisans there. So, do you want to touch a little bit upon the process and also give us a little bit of a background about the connection to your first game, also, right? It's based on the Athangadi tiles.
Yeah.
So, yeah, please give us a little bit of an overview of that too.
Yeah, sure. So these factories, I mean, I call it a factory, but essentially they are like small shacks. There is like no machinery there. It's just people working with their hands. The tiles are handmade. These are like very eco-friendly tiles in the sense that, like I said, there is no electricity involved in making them. There is no fire involved in making them. You don't have to bake the tiles like
Right.
ceramics and so on. It's they are generally cement based tiles. So how this is made is there is usually a brass template. So this template, or like it's sort of like a stencil which has the pattern that is going to come on the tile. This is placed on a sheet of glass. Okay, and then the artisan generally pours the colors which are going to make up the tile in the specific areas of the stencil. So like if you want the corner to be like a yellow petal, so only in the corner he pours the yellow paint, and the rest of the tile he makes it red. So the paint is poured by hand. So once the paint is poured, it is spread evenly. Then the tile is packed with cement and sand, and it is packed tightly so that it holds its shape. And once this is done, it is then kept to rest for a day, and then it is cured in water. So they put it in water tanks for like 3 days, and after the curing process, then it is dried in the sun for like 10 days. So it takes about 2 weeks for one tile to be made. So it's handmade, and it is like it uses only like sunlight and water and human effort to be made. What is interesting about these tiles is the way how they work, as in when you lay them on the floor. So they have like only a partial pattern on each tile. Okay, it will be in the corner. Like one of the corners, these tiles are square, so one of the corners will have say one petal. You have to place four tiles together, and each of these will have one petal. But when you place the four corners together, it forms a flower.
Right, right.
So that is how these tiles, when you lay them over a full floor, you suddenly have like repeating flowers which are like very symmetric and so on. So this particular fact that you need to bring four tiles together is actually the concept on which our game is based. So in our game, the story of our game is that you are building a floor. You have to collect tiles, and you place them. You have to bring four tiles together to try and form a pattern, and then depending on how many patterns you form, you score points, and then whoever scores the highest wins the game. So our game was like very strongly inspired by these tiles, and it's named after it also. So our game is named Athangudi, Artisans of Chettinad, as a sort of homage to this town as well as the people who work this craft.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, and we'll see through the podcast episode as well. We'll try to see if one of our listeners can get a hand on one of your games, and that way try it out themselves. But they're absolutely beautiful, and hats off to you for bringing this to the broader world, right? Otherwise, this is, like you mentioned, in a small part of Tamil Nadu, and a lot of us, even I didn't know about the tiles. Obviously, I've heard about the mansions in passing. Kudos to you for taking that extra step to bring this to the broader world, and we'll see what we can do from our side. More importantly, just beyond it being a board game, it also gives you an insight into the rich culture and the craftsmanship of this region, right? So they're very, very beautiful, bright in colors, and when placed together, there's these beautiful motifs that they form, which are just very, very nice and beautiful to see. Any other things to do while in Athangudi, or do you think we've covered most of the important aspects and experiences that Chettinad region has to offer?
Yeah, we have covered most of the major villages. If you're into temples, you would like to have like a mini pilgrimage sort of thing. There are like a couple of famous ones in the region. I'll just briefly touch upon them. Like I mentioned earlier, every village has a temple. There are like two which are like quite famous in the area. The first one is in a place called Pilayarpatti, and this is the Karpaga Vinayagar temple. So this is the Lord Ganesha. It is one of the ancestral temples of the Chettiyars. So the Chettiyars have like, if I remember well, 9 ancestral temples. This is one of them. This deity is considered like he's supposed to be a patron of businessmen. You might have seen this deity because it's very popular to see this Ganesha on the tearaway calendars that get printed every year.
Oh, okay.
So if you have seen, so these calendars are very popular with small businesses, and they use it for dual purpose. It's like also having a small place to do your puja in your shop, as well as
Right.
it serves a practical purpose of being a calendar. So the other temple which is interesting here is it's called the Sole Andavar temple. So this is a INR temple. So INR is like a guardian deity of villages. He is generally depicted as like a warrior. So he has a weapon and he's often riding some kind of mount. So it varies from village to village. Often it's a horse, it can be an elephant, it can be a bull, something. And the purpose of this deity is generally to protect the village from all evil. He generally ensures there are rains on time, bountiful harvests, and this kind of thing. So this particular temple, Sole Andavar, is like this INR prefers horses. So horse has come to become a sort of offering that you give to this deity. So Chettiyar families who are like going to embark on something important, some important milestone in their lives, they come and offer a terracotta horse at this temple. So if you visit this temple, you can see along the walls there are like rows and rows of horses of terracotta horses of all kinds of sizes. Some of them are even life size. I'm assuming that it is also a sort of, it signifies your wealth, the size of the horse.
Right.
So it's an interesting place to just see these horses. They are like I say terracotta, but they are also like colorful. They have been painted in nice colors, so it's like really attractive to see.
So yeah, definitely make sure to make a stop at this temple. Very unique to the region as well as largely in terms of the grander scheme of things. Now, Girin, after having seen this temple, any other quick points of interest that you'd like to mention around the area?
The area is famous for textiles. So maybe a quick word on this. I mentioned that there are weavers in most of the villages. So one of the important products to come out of this region is called Kandangi sari. So these saris have recently acquired a GI tag, so a geographical indicator tag, saying that they are unique to this region, and so nobody else is able to sell it as a Kandangi sari unless it's made in this area. So these are I mean, it's very normal for like silk saris to become very famous and associated with certain places like Kanchipuram silk or Mysore silk and so on. So what is really interesting about these saris is these are actually cotton saris. So they have a very distinctive checkered pattern, and they are again very colorful, just like the Athangudi tiles with reds, yellows, greens, pinks, and purples. And so they are again they are made on the looms. You can have a look at how they are woven in Karaikudi or Kannadu Kattan, and you also have the opportunity to purchase.
Right. Yeah, one other thing I also saw was the Palmyra basket weaving is also another indigenous craft that's popular to the place, apparently, right?
Yes. So this is also, I mean, you can pick this up as like a little souvenir. There's like small handbags or like little baskets that they weave. So another handicraft that is a good souvenir in this area.
Yeah, definitely. So a few different things to check out, right from the saris to the baskets to the tiles, right? A lot of them that you could stop and see the process of how they're being made and pick some up for yourselves. And while you're doing all of this, obviously you can't go without trying out some of the local cuisine of the region. And obviously, we mentioned at the beginning too that Chettinad is very popular for its well balanced cuisine. A lot of it. I mean, it's we've been hearing about this more than the mansions, I would say,
Correct.
especially a lot of the people from outside. So, do you want to give a quick overview about what the Chettinad cuisine has to offer?
Yeah, so Chettinad cuisine is probably its most famous export. So just a little bit of history, so this has very strong roots in the trading journeys that these merchants used to make. So they were typically their trade was mainly in salt and spices. So obviously their cooking has become influenced with what they used to trade with. So when they started trading with Kerala, they started introducing pepper into cooking from Talasheri. Once they started trading with Southeast Asia, it opened their eyes to cloves, nutmeg, cinnamon, bay leaves, all these from across Malaysia, Indonesia, Burma, Ceylon, and all these. Now,
Yeah.
if you have had, say, chicken chettinad in a restaurant or you have ordered it off Swiggy or something like that, it's very likely not chicken chettinad, because surprisingly for someone who's whose bread and butter was spices, they have mastered the use so that the usage of spice is very subtle. It's always only lingering in the background, but it never overpowers. It's a very restrained use of spices in their cooking. So I'll just go through some of the typical meals that they have. So we'll start with breakfast. Breakfast, like any typical South Indian meal, are typically vegetarian. You can have like a idli dosa. One sort of specialty is called a paniyaram. It's quite common in Tamil Nadu, but it's probably something new for people who visit from outside. It's made of rice batter, very similar to the batter used for idli or dosa, but these are placed in a special pan which has like little cavities in them, and so the pan cooks this little ball on three sides, which becomes crisp, and the top remains soft. So it's like a this is made in both savory as well as sweet forms. So
Interesting.
if it is savory, you have it with sambar and chutney, just like idli dosa. If it is sweet, it's usually made with jaggery, and it is part of it's like a dessert or a snack sort of serving. You can have idiyappam with coconut milk, and then there is one more thing called kandarappam. So this is another. It's a sweet, and it's a fried sweet which is made with rice and urad dal batter. It becomes sweet with the addition of jaggery, and cinnamon is used in this. So that is like the different thing. This is like a typical breakfast, typical Chettinad breakfast you can have in this region. Moving to lunch, Chettinad meal is centered around rice. So it is typically served on a banana leaf. You'll have your rice, you'll have something like a sambar, and you'll have maybe 2 or 3 vegetable preparations. I mean, it depends on how elaborate the meal is. Again, the vegetables may be cooked with coconut milk or with coconut, or they may be stir fried. They may have like a small gravy, slight gravy type of thing, this kind of things. But generally, Chettinad is most well known for its meat dishes. So the meat dishes in Chettinad are mostly served as side dishes. So they are accompaniments to the rice. So they are usually dry, or again they may have a little bit of gravy, and they primarily use only either chicken, mutton, or fish. and they use different combinations of spices to make the masalas, and it's amazing how every dish tastes distinctly different. Like you can have them back to back and you'll be suddenly thinking, oh, this is like something completely different, even though they may be using the same, say, chicken or mutton in it. It's the region is also quite well known for what is popularly called nose to tail cooking among the chefs. So for in mutton, they try to use all parts of the goat, from including the offal or the blood and everything. So if you are a little adventurous, you can try these kind of things. It's yeah, that is typically lunch. And for dinners, I would say the dinners are more cosmopolitan. They it's difficult to find like a rice meals for dinner. You can have parotas, chapatis, along with some sort of gravy sort of thing. And if you are based out of Karaikudi, which is like a proper town, you can also have like general other stuff like you find in any other city, like fried rice, noodles, or pizza. Or whatever. So, like the dinners are generally a sort of a la carte sort of thing where you try to eat what you want.
Yeah, mouth watering. And I also found the how do I pronounce this? Nanari Sharbat
Yeah.
that you mentioned, the Sarbat.
Yeah, so Nanari Sarbat is like a popular drink. It's used to
Right.
beat the heat. So Nanari is actually the extract of a herb. It's called sarsaparilla. So they extract this sort of syrup from this herb. I think they use the. I'm not sure if they use the root or the plant, but they extract it from that herb, and then it is mixed with sugar syrup, and it's made in. You get it in like bright colors, like bright red or bright yellow. This is like a concentrate, so this needs to be diluted with a little bit of lemon juice and either water or carbonated soda, depending on how you prefer it. You get these bottles to purchase. It's not very expensive, for like 70-80 rupees. You can, if you like the taste, you can buy a bottle and take it home so that you can have it for a few more days.
Yeah. Definitely try that, and especially if you're roaming around the whole day or mansion hopping the whole day, this will serve as a quick refresher during a pet stop or after your lunch, right? So, thank you so much, Giran, for beautifully laying out the overall history of the region, the people of the region, specialities, right from the architecture and the mansions to the temples and the arts and crafts. All of it was so beautifully laid out. And if I may, I'll use the opportunity to call it the both the tales of Chettinad as well as the tiles of Chettinad, right? And it was beautifully interlinked with your story, your personal story as well, starting your own company that is inspired by the tiles of Athangudi. And like I mentioned, we'll try to see how we could perhaps make one of your board games available to our listeners too, as a way of saying thank you for this very beautiful gesture of you taking the arts and crafts and art forms to the broader India and the broader world too. Artisans of Athangudi, right? That's what the board game is called. And if people want to check out the game and purchase the game, what's the best way of doing that, Kiran?
So it's available on our website. So it's XOtoXO.com. So it's XOtoXO.com. Or you can like reach out to us on like social media. We are XOtoXO Games on both Instagram and Twitter. These are the two places where we are most active. You can just drop a message and we'll let you know how you can order one.
Thank you so much, Giran, for firstly reaching out and sharing these wonderful tales and stories from Chettinad. And we'd like to wish you, from the bottom of our hearts as well, the very best luck and best wishes in this new venture you've started.
Thank you so much, Saif. It was a real pleasure. I would say like thank you for this opportunity, because frankly in in preparation for this episode and while speaking on this episode, I got to relive the trip that I went on like a few months ago. So I enjoyed it as well. So thank you so much.
That was yet another great episode on the Musafir Stories. Make sure to show us some love by sharing the podcast with your friends and family. We are on Instagram and Twitter at Musafir Stories. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM podcast app or the website. Follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram.